I'll write this as a first-person narration from a man in his 60s, addressing the audience as family, community, family, or similar relational terms rather than friends or viewers, following the exact structural formula from the analysis. New names, new setting, new hidden past mechanism, same emotional architecture. My son-in-law texted the family group chat 2 hours after my wife came out of open-heart surgery. Everyone needs to stop treating this like an emergency. She's 67. This was always going to happen eventually. Then, just to me, a separate message. Dad, you need to stop guilting everyone into acting like this is a crisis. I read it twice. I didn't reply to the group. I typed one word back to him, okay, and set the phone face down on the arm of the hospital chair. That's who I am. I absorb things. I have, for a long time. Goo. Goo. But 3 months later, when a video I never asked anyone to make ended up in front of nearly 1,000 strangers, and my son-in-law was one of them, what he saw on that screen made him go so pale that his own daughter asked him if he was having chest pains. Family, before I go any further, thank you for sitting with me for this. Tell me in the comments what part of the country you're watching from tonight. I read every one of them, and I want to say clearly, some details here are shaped for privacy, but what this leaves in your chest by the end is real enough. My name is Raymond Kessler. I'm 66 years old, and for 38 years I have run the boiler room and maintenance shop at Fairview Regional Medical Center in Lansing, Michigan. Not a glamorous job. I know every pipe in that basement the way another man knows the veins in his own hands. There's a valve outside the east stairwell that sticks every October when the heat first kicks on, and every October for 38 years, I've told myself I'll finally replace the gasket properly instead of patching it. I never have. Some habits outlive the reasons you started them. That morning the basement smelled like hot dust, the particular smell of a boiler waking up after a mild September. My knees ached in the spot they've ached since 2016, and everything about the day was ordinary except that my wife of 41 years was lying in a hospital bed 4 floors above me, and I had gone down to check on a pressure gauge because she made me. Raymond, go do your rounds, Diane had said at 6 that morning, her voice still thick from the sedative they'd given her the night before to help her sleep. She was sitting up against 2 pillows, her silver hair pulled back loose, one hand wrapped around a plastic cup of water a nurse had brought. You go check your boilers, and you come back up at 11. If you sit in this room all morning, you're going to make yourself sick, and then I'll have 2 patients to worry about instead of 1. She used my full name the way she does when she means it. Raymond Arthur Kessler. Go, and there was no arguing with that tone after 41 years of hearing it. So I'd gone down into the basement, put on my work shirt, and started my checklist. But somewhere between the second boiler and the pressure valve on the third, my hands stopped moving on their own. I stood there in the heat and the hum of machinery, and realized I couldn't remember if I'd already checked gauge 2, or if I was about to check it again. 38 years, and I had never once lost my place. My phone buzzed. I nearly dropped it, fishing it out of my pocket, my heart going so hard I felt it in my ears. Not the hospital. A text from my coworker Marcus about a delivery of filters. I let the breath out slow and leaned back against the cool cinder block wall. Standing there, I saw the basement the way you see a place you've stopped noticing after 4 decades, the rust bleeding through the paint on the old boiler casing. I'd reported twice and been told wasn't urgent. The water stain on the ceiling from a pipe that burst back in 2011. The little metal folding chair in the corner, where I eat my lunch every day, at noon. I thought about the first morning I walked down those stairs in 1987. I was 27. Diane was 25. Our daughter Paige was 2, and she used to point at my ID badge and say Daddy's building like the whole hospital belonged to me personally. I'd taken the job for the union, the pension, the health insurance, 3 things my own father told me never to take for granted. I'd taken it because the shift let me be home most evenings for dinner. At 27, I already understood something most people take a lifetime to learn. Dignity doesn't live in your title. It lives in whether you show up. My phone rang. Cardiology, extension 4400. Mr. Kessler, this is Dr. Alvarez. We have Diane's test results back, and I'd like to speak with you in person as soon as you're able. My checklist stayed clipped to the wall, half finished for the first time in 38 years. I'm coming up right now, I said, and my hands shook hard enough that I fumbled buttoning my regular shirt over my undershirt in the stairwell. Dr. Alvarez was a small, steady woman with reading glasses pushed up into dark hair and she sat down across from me in the family consultation room, which told me before she opened her mouth that this was going to take longer than a minute. Mr. Kessler, Diane has severe mitral valve regurgitation. Her heart has been compensating for it for a long time, probably years, and it's reached the point where compensation isn't enough anymore. My chest went tight. I thought about Diane getting winded climbing our porch steps, waving me off every time I mentioned it. Getting older. Raymond, don't make a fuss. What does that mean for treatment? I asked, because that was the only question I had steady footing to ask. She needs open heart surgery to repair or replace the valve. Given how far this has progressed, we don't want to wait longer than 2 weeks. The words landed in my chest like a dropped weight. Is she going to be all right? My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. Mitral valve surgery has a strong success rate, and Diane is otherwise healthy for her age. I won't pretend there's no risk, but the risk of doing nothing is far greater. I nodded slowly, the way you nod when you're trying to make information settle, instead of just sit there refusing to move. Can I see her? Diane's eyes opened the second I pushed the door, and the look on her face was pure relief. No performance at all. The relief of someone who'd been waiting for exactly one person. Raymond. Her voice was rough from the oxygen line. I'm here, Dee. I pulled the chair close and took her hand in both of mine, and her fingers curled around mine with a grip that cracked something open in my chest. She studied my face the way she's studied it for 41 years, reading it like large print. You called Paige, she said. Not a question, a fact she'd already worked out. My throat tightened. Not yet. I will. Diane turned toward the window. Outside, the Michigan sky was the flat gray of early fall, going nowhere in particular. When she spoke again, her voice had gone quiet and careful, the voice she uses when she's finally decided to set something down after carrying it a long while. Raymond, you are the most patient man I have ever known. It's one of the things I love best about you. She squeezed my hand once, hard. It's also the thing that scares me most. They moved her to a private room that afternoon, and I called Paige from the hallway, my back against the cold tile. She picked up on the fourth ring, and I heard road noise behind her voice. Dad, what's going on with Mom? She needs open heart surgery. Paige. They found a problem with her heart valve. A pause, then, God. Okay, that's okay. Well, keep me posted. Travis and I have that trip to Traverse City coming up, so timing might get tricky, but keep me posted. The line had road noise in it the whole time, and not once did her voice change register. Your mother wants to hear your voice, I said. Can you, Dad? I'm driving. I'll call this weekend. The call ended. I stood there in the hallway, a long moment with the phone still against my ear, listening to a dial tone that had already gone quiet, the way you listen to a room after someone's left it. I went back in and told Diane she'd call this weekend, and Diane looked at me for a long moment before she said, very gently, Tell me something good. Raymond, tell me something I don't already know. So I did. I told her about Marcus and the filter delivery, about a nurse's aide I'd seen sneaking a granola bar to a scared kid in the pediatric wing that morning. She laughed, short and real, and the sound of it stung behind my eyes. Then she said, Do you remember the day we dropped Paige off for her freshman year of college? You were on shift that day. You came up from the basement to say goodbye, and she saw you in your work shirt, and she told her roommate you were in facilities, like that was some separate department from a person. My stomach dropped. I didn't know she said that. I know you didn't. I never told you because I didn't want you carrying it. But Raymond, I've been carrying it for 18 years, and I am tired. The room filled up with everything that sentence held. I thought about every tuition check I'd written working overtime shifts, every time I'd told myself Paige's distance was just growing up, just a daughter becoming her own person, nothing that reflected on me at all if I was patient enough. She's ashamed of me, I said. The words felt strange, leaving my mouth not new, but never spoken aloud before. She's foolish. And we raised her better than that, Diane said fiercely, her voice cracking slightly at the edges. And now she's 40 and I'm in a hospital bed and she's asking about a trip to Traverse City. I held onto her hand and said nothing, because there was nothing that would have been enough. Surgery was scheduled for a Tuesday in early October. The 2 weeks before were the longest of my life. I went to work every morning because Diane insisted the motion of it would keep me from spiraling, and she was right, the way she is right about nearly everything that matters. The morning of, I got to the hospital at 5:30. Diane was already awake. hair braided the way she braids it when she means to face something head-on. "You look terrible," she told me. "Good morning to you too, Dee. Did you eat?" "I had toast." Raymond Kessler. "Did you eat toast? Or did you stand at the counter holding toast and staring out the window?" I opened my mouth and closed it again. She pointed a finger at me. "There's a vending machine downstairs. Go get something with actual protein in it. I need to go into surgery knowing you're not going to fall apart in the waiting room." My throat knotted so fast it shocked me. "I'm not going to fall apart." "I know you're not," she said, her voice going soft, all the fierceness dropping away at once. "Because you never have. Not when your father died. Not when we lost the baby in 1985. Not once in 41 years. They took her back at 7:10. I walked as far as the double doors marked "Surgical Family Please Wait," and she looked up at me from the gurney and said, "Don't count ceiling tiles, Raymond. It's a bad habit." 8. "How do you know I count tiles? I've known you 41 years. The doors swung shut. I counted 9 tiles between my chair and the coffee machine before I made myself stop. I sat in that waiting room for 7 hours. I drank coffee that tasted like scorched cardboard, read the same magazine article about kitchen backsplashes 3 times without absorbing a word, and a volunteer named Ruth brought me a granola bar twice and talked both times about her grandson's Little League season, and I was grateful for every single word of it because it gave my mind something to hold besides the double doors. At 2:40, Dr. Alvarez came through them, and I was on my feet before she'd taken a second step. "Mr. Kessler." A small, real smile. "The repair went beautifully. She's in recovery and doing very well. My knees nearly gave. Can I see her?" Her setting Gary. "Give her an hour. She's already asking for you." That hour was the longest 60 minutes I have lived through. When they finally brought me in, Diane was pale in a way I'd never seen on her, tubes and monitors around her, a green line ticking steadily across a screen. Her eyes opened. "Did they fix it?" "They fixed it, Dee. You're going to be just fine." "Good," she whispered, and lifted her hand off the blanket an inch. Not a wave, just a small motion that said, "I am still here." I took out my phone and photographed her exactly like that, pale against white sheets, hand barely raised, alive. I opened the family group chat, my fingers trembling. "Mom's out of surgery. It went well. She wants to hear everyone's voice." I sent it, set the phone face down on the bed frame, and held her hand with both of mine, listening to the green line beep its slow, faithful rhythm. The phone buzzed against the bed frame 20 minutes later. I picked it up. The group chat first from my son-in-law, Travis. "Everyone needs to stop treating this like an emergency. She's 67. This was always going to happen eventually. All this hospital stuff just makes it harder on everyone else." Then, a separate message, just to me. "Dad, you need to stop guilting everyone into acting like this is a crisis." I read it once. I read it again. I read it 5 times, not because I misunderstood it the first time, but because some part of me kept hoping a word would shift, a meaning would soften, that the screen would show me something other than exactly what it showed me. It didn't. Diane's hand was still in mine. The monitor kept its steady count, 58 beats a minute. Strong, even. The sound of a repaired heart, doing precisely what it was built to do. I pressed my fist against my sternum hard enough to leave a mark. "You're making a face," Diane murmured, eyes barely open, foggy with anesthesia. "I'm fine," I said, and my voice came out strange and compressed. "You are the worst liar in the state of Michigan," she said, and drifted back under. I sat there with the phone burning a hole in my shirt pocket, thinking about every single thing I had done for Paige Kessler, now Paige Whitmore. About the night in 1988, when she was 3, and ran a fever so high, I drove to 2 closed pharmacies, before finding one open, at 1 a.m. About wiring her $50 from a Western Union near the Smithsonian when she called crying from a school trip because she'd lost her spending money. About the morning of her wedding, when she'd asked me quietly, not in front of Travis, "Dad, you're not going to wear your work boots with the suit, right?" And I'd said, "Of course not, sweetheart." And she'd exhaled with a relief that told me exactly how worried she'd been. I never told Diane that one either. "He said she doesn't want to be bothered," I said out loud, to nobody. "Her mother just had open-heart surgery, and he says, stop guilting everyone." Hearing it in my own voice made it land differently than reading it on a screen. It landed low, like a dropped stone. A young nurse came to check the monitors, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone used to night shifts. "How are you holding up, Mr. Kessler?" "I've been better," I admitted. "You've been here since this morning. That's a long time to sit in a hard place." "She'd have done the same for me," I said. The nurse nodded like that was the most reasonable thing she'd heard all day and slipped back out. I sat forward, elbows on my knees, face in my rough hands. 38 years of solvent and boiler grease will roughen a man's hands, and I felt something shift low in my chest, not break. I know what broken feels like. This was different, more like a door painted shut for years finally giving, the hinges moving for the first time in a long time. "D," I said softly. Her eyes stayed closed, but her fingers moved slightly against the blanket. She could hear me. "I'm done absorbing this one. Whatever comes next, I'm done just saying okay." Her fingers moved again. Not quite a squeeze, more an acknowledgement, like a woman who'd been waiting a long time to hear it. Diane came home on a Thursday. I'd rearranged the whole downstairs the night before, moved her reading chair into the bedroom so she wouldn't need the stairs, bought a grabber tool from the pharmacy, taped her medication schedule to the fridge in the large clear print I use for maintenance logs. When I pulled up in the truck, she looked at it and said, "You washed it." I did. "Raymond, you haven't washed that truck since the last election. I wanted it clean for you," I said, my voice rougher than I meant, and she reached over and put her palm against my cheek before letting the discharge nurse help her into the seat. The drive home was quiet in the good way. Two people who've been through something large together and don't need to fill the silence. "The mums are out," she said as we turned onto our street. Our neighbor Carol had a row of them along her fence, deep orange, absurd against the gray October light. "I missed them, coming up," Diane said simply. "I don't want to miss things anymore, Raymond." For 3 weeks after that, the house was quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't peace so much as a held breath. Then one evening in late October, Travis showed up at the door, holding a bouquet of grocery store flowers and a fruit basket wrapped in cellophane the size of a hubcap. "Raymond," he said, extending it with both hands like an offering. "I should have come by sooner." He crossed straight to Diane, kissed her cheek, told her she looked wonderful, and asked her all the right questions in the right order. "How's your energy? Are you sleeping? Has physical therapy started?" And nodded at all the right moments. But not once in 20 minutes did he ask her what the surgery had actually felt like, whether she'd been scared. He asked about her the way you ask about a car after a fender bender. Is it running? What's the timeline for full function? Then he turned to me. "Raymond, I actually wanted to talk to you about something. Diane's health situation has Paige and me thinking hard about making sure everything's in order." He said it the way you'd mention an oil change. "A power of attorney. Just practical planning. It doesn't take anything away from you. It just means if something happens, Paige can step in and handle things smoothly." "I know what a power of attorney is, Travis." "Of course you do. It's just a protection." Diane made a small sound from her chair. "That's very thoughtful, Travis," she said, in the tone she reserves for people she's being careful around, sweet as powdered sugar and just as substantial. "Which attorney drew it up?" Travis blinked, just once. "We haven't drawn it up yet. Wanted to talk to Raymond first." "Of course," Diane said. "So when you do, we'll have our own attorney review it. Independent counsel, standard practice, isn't it?" Something recalculated behind his eyes. His smile arrived half a second late. "Absolutely. Whatever makes you comfortable." He left 40 minutes later, with the fruit basket sitting empty on the counter, and the flowers still dry in their cellophane. When I came back inside, Diane was gripping the armrests of her chair, her knuckles pale. "That man came into our house 3 weeks after my heart surgery, with a fruit basket and a plan to take everything we have. He hasn't drawn it up yet." "He's absolutely drawn it up," Diane said. "He wanted to see your face first. Raymond, get your notebook." So I did. I sat at the kitchen table and started writing the date, what he'd brought, every word about the power of attorney, the half-second delay before his smile. I wrote it in the clear block print I use for equipment logs, and when I was done, I felt something settle in my chest that wasn't calm, exactly, but was close to readiness. The next Saturday, at the grocery store on Grand River Avenue, I ran into our neighbor Carol in the produce aisle. Her face did something complicated when she saw me, guilt flickering before she smoothed it into a neighborly smile. "Raymond, how's Diane doing?" "Stronger every day. I'm so glad." Her eyes kept moving separately from her smile. "Raymond, I don't know if I should mention this." "Say it." "Paige and Travis stopped by last week." They were asking about the neighborhood, what houses have sold for lately. They mentioned you two might need a different living situation. They said managed. That was the word they used. My grip tightened on my basket. I appreciate you telling me, Carol. I genuinely do. She pressed my arm once and pushed her cart toward the bread aisle, relieved to have it off her chest. I stood there a moment with my heart hammering, not from surprise. I'd already worked out the shape of it days before in my basement, but from confirmation, that particular cold clarity that settles in when something you feared turns out to be exactly as bad as you feared. They were already pricing the house. Paige came the following Saturday, 6 weeks after the surgery, with a gas station bouquet still in its plastic sleeve, which she set on the counter without looking for a vase. She hugged Diane with the careful stiffness of someone afraid of hurting a person or of being held by them. Mom, you look so much better than I expected. Than you expected, Diane repeated, smiling that powdered sugar smile. Well, that's something. After 15 minutes of the right questions asked in the right tone, Paige turned to me. Dad, can we talk? Just us. In the kitchen, she dropped the warmth from her voice the way you drop a coat coming inside. Dad, Travis and I have been looking at options. There's a really nice place in Okemos, Willowbrook. Pool, full-time medical staff. For someone in Mom's situation, it'd be ideal. Your mother is recovering well at home. Dr. Alvarez is pleased with her progress. For now. But Dad, you're 66. Mom just had major heart surgery. What happens the next time something goes wrong? You can't be her full-time caregiver forever. I've been her husband for 41 years. I'm not her caregiver. There's a difference. Something flickered across her face, a script briefly abandoned, then reset. What happens to the house? I asked. She set her coffee mug down with a small click. We'd figure that out. We'd want the assets managed properly, so they could fund long-term care. That's just responsible planning. The assets, I said. You mean the house I've lived in for 29 years. The house I paid off in 2014. The house where I redid the kitchen floor the summer you got married because your mother wanted it done before the rehearsal dinner. My voice went rough on the last part, and I didn't try to smooth it. This isn't an asset. This is our home. Her jaw tightened, the same way it used to when she was 16, and had decided in advance she wasn't going to accept whatever I said next. I'm just trying to help, she said, and the warmth was entirely gone from her voice now. She left 20 minutes later, and I watched her from the doorway, phone already at her ear before she'd started the car. Back inside, Diane closed her eyes for a long moment. The particular ache of a mother, hearing exactly what she already knew was coming. Write it down, she said. Every word. The name of that place. What she said about the assets. I was already at the table with my notebook open. Before I tell you what I'd hidden for 22 years, something that changes everything you think you know about who I am, I need to know you're still with me, family. Drop the number 66 in the comments right now if you're still here, and I want to be upfront. Parts of what follows are shaped to protect real people, but the truth underneath them is not softened at all. There's a thing that happens when you work in a hospital basement long enough. You stop being visible to the people above you. Not painfully, at first just practically. The doctors, the administrators, they stop registering you as a person in the room. You become part of the building. I'd known this for 38 years. What I didn't know until one night, 22 years ago, was that invisibility could be the most valuable thing a man owns. I want to tell you about that night, because understanding what I did back then is the only way to understand what I was capable of doing now. It was a Thursday in November, 22 years back. Thanks for watching. I was doing my rounds through the billing and records wing on the second floor, which was supposed to be empty by 9 most nights. A strip of light under the door of the senior billing office stopped me. I knocked. No answer. I pushed the door open 6 inches and stopped cold. 2 men in dress shirts stood at a printer against the far wall, feeding patient claim forms through, checking something on a laptop between each one, then setting the originals into a shredder bin. Print, check, shred. A rhythm that had clearly been running a while before I opened that door. I knew both men by sight, senior billing administrators who'd never once acknowledged me in 20-some years of passing in the halls. They didn't see me now either, because to them, standing in a dark doorway in a dark uniform, I was the same as the wall. I pulled the door shut without a sound and finished my rounds with my heart going so hard I felt it in my fingertips. The second night, I brought my phone, an old flip phone, With a small camera Paige had shown me how to use one Christmas, back when I'd used it exactly once to photograph a raccoon that had gotten into the loading dock. I stood outside that office door at 11 to 15 the following Wednesday and took 3 photographs through a 2-inch gap. My hands shook so badly I was sure most of them would be blurred. 2 were. One was clear enough to show a patient claim form and a dollar figure, a large one, for the half second before it went into the shredder. I went back 4 more times over the next 2 weeks. Purchase codes for procedures that had never been performed. Insurance claims filed for equipment that had never once come through the loading dock I managed. Numbers going into Wartalum and vanishing before they reached another. I balance my own household budget every month. I know what a number looks like when it's trying to go somewhere it hasn't been authorized to go. On the 5th week, I printed the 6 clearest photographs at the pharmacy for a few dollars, put them in an envelope, and sat with it at my kitchen table a long while. Diane came in wearing her robe, reading glasses pushed up into her hair. "What's that?" "Something I found at work." "Something bad?" "Not a question." "Then you know what to do," she said. No hesitation at all. The next morning at 7, I asked the hospital's compliance office for 5 minutes with the administrator. I got 45. 3 weeks later, 2 investigators from the State Insurance Fraud Division walked into Fairview Regional carrying briefcases, the particular purposeful walk of people who've been sent somewhere official. 4 days after that, both billing administrators were gone, nameplates off their doors before lunch. 6 days after that, I got a message that the hospital's CEO wanted to see me. His name was Dr. Whitfield, and he was standing on my side of his desk when I walked in, which had never happened before. He shook my hand with both of his. "Raymond, sit down, please," he said. He turned a folder toward me. The investigators had confirmed everything. Nearly $1.8 million in fraudulent insurance claims filed over 4 years, siphoned through fictitious procedure codes and phantom equipment purchases. Some of it billed against the hospital's charity care fund meant for patients who couldn't pay. "Without your photographs," he said, "this doesn't get found for years, maybe not until it's 10 times worse. You understand what you did?" "I just took some pictures," I said. "You took pictures that required 6 trips over 5 weeks, alone, at personal risk, with a camera phone in a dark hallway. That is not a small thing, Raymond." He offered me a promotion, a supervisor title, a real office, a healthy raise. I turned it down. There are people in this building at 2 a.m. who need someone checking on them who isn't behind a desk, I said. "I can't do that from an office." He looked at me a long moment. "How?" "Then I'll make sure you're taken care of where you are. And Raymond, if you ever change your mind, the offer stands." Now, 22 years later, standing at the top of the basement stairs with my notebook heavy in my shirt pocket, full of entries about Travis and Willowbrook and property values on my own street, I thought about what I'd told Dr. Whitfield back then. I don't think I can do that from an office. What I never told him, never told anyone, not even Diane, was the other reason I'd stayed, because those men at that printer had looked straight through me, the same way people had looked through me my whole life, and I'd understood, standing in that dark hallway with my heart hammering, that there was a kind of power in being underestimated no title could replace. Being invisible had given me the one thing men in pressed shirts never accounted for, the element of complete surprise. Some lessons you learn once and keep for the rest of your life. November came in cold and gray. Diane was stronger, walking to the end of the block and back every morning, which she called her exercise program, and I called watching a miracle happen in slow motion. For 3 weeks the house stayed quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't peace. Then, one Sunday, Paige and Travis came back together, and this time, Travis carried a leather document folder under his arm, slim and professional, the kind that announces this is not a social call before anyone says a word. They sat at my table. I sat at the head, where I always sit, and this time, I was aware of choosing it deliberately. Travis slid a spiral-bound document across the table, 12 pages, tabbed with yellow flags. "Our attorney drew this up," Paige said, her voice business-warm, a register she'd clearly rehearsed. "A durable power of attorney, financial and healthcare decisions. Standard language. I'd like to read it," I said. "Of course. Take your time." I read slowly, the way I read everything, one section before the next. The main body was what Travis had described standard authorization if I became incapacitated. What he hadn't described was tucked into Section 5, subsection C, between 2 paragraphs about medical proxies. the agent shall have full authority to determine the principal's place of residence, including the authority to arrange for assisted or skilled residential care placement, if the agent determines in good faith that such placement serves the principal's best interest. I read it twice to be sure. My hands stayed steady. My voice, when it came, was quieter and harder than I meant. Section 5. Subsection C. This gives Paige the authority to decide where we live. That's a standard healthcare provision, Travis said. It means, I said, that if Paige decides we need to go somewhere more managed, she can put us there without my agreement, because I'll have already signed away my right to disagree. Dad, we are not planning anything against your wishes. This is a protection. You used that word last time too. Diane said, calm the way deep water is calm still on the surface, substantial all the way down. Protection. I want to ask you directly, Paige. Protection. From what? Protection. Paige opened her mouth and closed it. From the courts, Travis said, stepping in smoothly. From a process that takes months and costs thousands if neither of you can decide for yourselves. Then you won't mind if my own attorney reviews it first, I said. The room's temperature dropped the way a room does when someone opens a window in winter. They left 40 minutes later. Diane turned to me at the door, eyes bright and fierce. You're calling a lawyer tonight. I already know who. In my wallet, behind my library card, there'd been a business card for 15 years. Ellen Marsh, attorney at law, Lansing. Ellen had worked the overnight desk at the hospital's records office to put herself through law school while I mopped that same floor 3 nights a week. One December morning years back, she'd pressed that card into my hand and said, if you ever need anything, Mr. Kessler, I mean that. I'd never used it. I dialed that night. Ellen's office smelled like carpet cleaner and old coffee. She read the document without touching her pen once, and when she got to Section 5, subsection C, her jaw tightened. She took off her glasses and pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose. Raymond, that phrase good faith is doing enormous work in this sentence. It means Paige doesn't need a court order or a second opinion. She only needs to believe she's acting in your best interest, and she's the one who decides what that means. And the house. If she moves you both to assisted living under this authority, and you've signed over financial control too, she'd have legal standing to sell the house, to fund your care. Courts have upheld that in Michigan more than once. Raymond, if you'd signed this, Paige could have had you and Diane in Willowbrook by spring and the house on the market by summer, legally, without your consent, because you'd have already given it. I pressed my fist to my sternum. The language wasn't accidental, she said quietly. Someone asked for it specifically. Then she asked about my notebook. I set it on her desk. I set it on her desk. I set it on her desk. She read it for several minutes without speaking, her expression sharpening into something focused and certain. This is exactly the kind of documentation that matters, Raymond. Before I left, she told me she'd start preparing a formal response, not reactive, but ready, whatever came next. She'd seen this pattern before. I went back to my night shifts. Diane insisted she was strong enough to be alone in the evenings now, and told me so with the particular firmness of a woman who'd had enough of being watched. The empty halls at Fairview after 10 had always been where I did my clearest thinking, and I had plenty to think about the notebook fat with entries now, its cover curved from the shape of my chest, the house on Chester Street with the kitchen window that caught the morning light the way Diane had said, look at that, about nearly every day, for 29 years. I thought about losing that window. I thought. Not while I'm standing. 2 nights later, Doctor. Whitfield found me at the utility sink at the end of a hallway, no jacket, reading glasses hanging from his shirt pocket, at 10:15 at night, in a building he had no reason to be in. Raymond, I thought I'd find you here. Basement, then the 3rd floor. 38 years. You learn the pattern. He told me the hospital was planning its 60th anniversary gala, and the Springboard members, donors, community leaders, and a committee had been pushing to name a fund after me. A patient assistance fund, specifically for families who couldn't afford care, funded partly by the money recovered from the fraud case. I'd like to keep this quiet, if that's possible. D I I K I I I I I I I I I I I I I I I I I I I I I I I, 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 I. This possible funding, the Fellman started 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 funding, I said, when I trusted my voice. There's a board vote in the spring. After that, it gets harder to keep quiet. He left the way he'd come, and I sat on a folding chair in that empty hallway a long while afterward, then took out my notebook and wrote one line at the bottom of the page, smaller than the rest. Two, two, two. They have until spring to do whatever they're planning. I'm not giving them that long. They came back on a Sunday in January. No flowers this time. Paige knocked twice and opened the door before I reached it. Travis followed with a casserole he set on the counter without offering to stay and eat it. Diane was already at the table when I heard the car pull up. Emily, I mean, Paige, Diane said, catching herself, then steadying. You've been thinking carefully about what comes next. Huh, 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 huh. Before you start, I want to ask you something. How's your shoulder? You mentioned it was bothering you. Paige blinked, thrown. It's fine. Better. Good. I ask because I want you to know I remember things about you. Small things, the way a mother does. I wanted you to know that before we talk about whatever you came here to say. Travis cleared his throat. Raymond, it's been almost 2 months. Have you had time to review the document? I've reviewed it. I spoke with an attorney. The room's temperature dropped again. Which attorney? Travis asked, his voice flatter now. The warmth peeled back. That's between me and my attorney. CDZ. CDZ. He leaned forward. Raymond, I want to be straight. The longer this goes without a plan, the more exposed you both are. As Lecter, you've described protecting me for 4 months, I said. I'd like you to tell me plainly what you're protecting me from, Diane answered, before he could. Tene, 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 tene. He can't say it plainly, she said, because plainly would sound like this. She looked at him steadily. You want the house. You want the accounts. You want us somewhere small and managed where we won't be inconvenient. And you want it done with our own signatures so it looks like we chose it. That is what you're protecting us from us noticing. The silence afterward wasn't comfortable, and I wasn't going to fill it. Paige's face went through something raw for 1 second before her jaw set hard. That's not fair, and it's not true. We're trying to do right by this family. Then do it, Diane said, her eyes bright and fierce, her voice cracking only slightly. Come, sit with me. Ask me how the scar feels. Ask your father what he did Tuesday. Be here. Not in this house collecting something here. For one moment, something in Paige's face looked ready to break open the way things need to before they rebuild. Then Travis put a hand on her shoulder. We should go. He shook my hand at the door, the same practiced grip, but something colder behind his eyes. Now a man who'd moved from persuasion to something else entirely. The gala fell on a Friday in April. Diane ironed my shirt the night before, then ironed it again. It was already ironed, I told her. It's more ironed now, she said, without looking up. The ceremony was held in the hospital's atrium, glass walls throwing spring light across 300 folding chairs. Diane sat in the front row in the navy dress she saves for things that matter, Ellen Marsh beside her in a gray suit. I sat further back among the maintenance and custodial staff, watching the program donor recognitions, a hospital choir, a slideshow until the CEO took the podium after the third award. I want to tell you a story about this hospital that most of you have never heard, he said. And he told them about the fraud, the $1.8 million. The 4 days investigators spent in the billing wing. He didn't name the men who'd taken it. He named me, at the end. The person who made this discovery possible has worked in this building for 38 years. Most of you have walked past him without knowing his name. His name is Raymond Kessler. 22 years ago, he came back night after night at personal risk to document what he'd found, because he believed that money belonged to patients who needed it, not to men in pressed shirts. He was offered a promotion and a substantial raise. He turned down both. He told me he wanted to stay where he could see the patients. 300 faces turned to find me. My hands gripped my knees. I nodded once, because it was the only thing I could manage. A woman stood up in the second row, maybe 50, in a blazer, the posture of someone who'd rehearsed standing. "My name is Denise Coulter," she said, turning to face the room instead of the stage. 14 years ago, my son had emergency heart surgery here, and our insurance denied the claim twice. I was told there was a fund that could help, and it covered almost everything we owed. I didn't know until this morning that the fund existed because of what Mr. Kessler did. She looked straight at me. "My son is a junior in college now. Thank you, Mr. Kessler. I mean that with everything I have." I couldn't speak. The CEO announced the fund's new name, the Raymond Kessler Patient Assistance Fund, and the room rose, and the sound of it filled that glass atrium and lifted toward the ceiling like something finally let go. I crossed to Diane's chair and crouched beside her, and she grabbed my hand with both of hers and held on hard enough to hurt, and I let it hurt, because some pain is exactly the right kind. "You kept this for 22 years, she said, crying the way she'd cried the day Paige was born. No management of it at all. You saved almost $2 million and told me you just took some pictures." "I did just take some pictures," I said, and she laughed through the crying, ragged and full of 41 years of knowing me. By that evening, Ellen texted me a number over 900 shares of a video someone had recorded of the CEO's speech on their phone. Somewhere in those 900, I knew, was Travis. Travis called on a Wednesday night, 4 days later. First time he'd called, not texted, in 6 months. I let it ring twice before answering, not to make a point. I just needed the 2 rings to decide what kind of conversation I was willing to have. Raymond. His voice was different, careful, in a new way. "I saw the video. Paige showed me. I didn't know about any of it, what you did for that hospital. I know you didn't. Why didn't you ever say anything?" "I didn't think it would change anything." A pause. "Can we talk?" "Just the 2 of us. No Paige." We met at a diner off Saginaw Highway. Vinyl booths, pie under glass. Nobody either of us knew. He looked smaller across that table than he ever had in my kitchen. He apologized real words, in the right order, about the text after surgery, about Willowbrook, about the document. I listened. Then he said, "Raymond, I still think some kind of formal arrangement would be smart, going forward." "Travis, stop." I set my coffee down. "I need you to hear me. I have read exactly what that document does, and I am never going to sign anything like it. Not because I don't understand what could happen to us. Because I do, and I am not willing to hand our lives to anyone. Not you, not Paige, not anyone." His eyes went glassy, and he looked out the window at the highway traffic a long moment. "I don't know how this got so far," he said quietly. "I do," I said, "but that's a longer conversation than tonight." 3 days after that, Ellen called, her voice carrying the particular flatness of a lawyer delivering news she's already processed, so you don't have to watch her process it. "Paige filed a petition for guardianship. She's claiming cognitive decline. She's got a doctor lined up, not your physician." My stomach dropped 6 inches. "Can she do that?" "She filed it. Whether it succeeds is a different question." "Raymond, I've been ready for this. I need you in my office tomorrow morning." I signed everything the next day, not a surrender of anything, but a full legal response. My own physician's written certification of complete cognitive capacity, a financial accounting showing careful, consistent management of every account, and the notebook, every page, entered as documentation of a clear pattern of conduct. "Now what?" I asked. "Now we wait for the hearing," Ellen said. That night I told Diane everything. No softening. And she listened without interrupting once. Which told me she understood. This wasn't the kind of thing you interrupt. When I finished, she put both hands on my face. "You are the strongest person in this house," she said. "I just needed you to know that you know it too." The hearing was in March. Diane ironed my shirt that morning, the same one, a 3rd time, then pressed her palm flat against my chest at the door. "Come home with good news." "I intend to." Ingham County Probate Court smelled like old carpet and the particular tension of a room where lives get decided. The hearing lasted 35 minutes. Paige sat beside a lawyer I didn't recognize and never once looked at me. The judge read through our exhibits without comment, the physician's letter, the financial records, the notebook, page by page, then asked Paige's attorney 3 questions, each shorter and sharper than the last. His answers satisfied no one, least of all him. She set down her glasses. Petition denied. Mr. Kessler has demonstrated full cognitive capacity and sound financial management. There is no basis for guardianship. She looked directly at the lawyer's table. I'd counsel your client to think carefully before bringing an action like this again. Ellen gripped my shoulder once, hard. In the hallway outside, Paige caught up to me, her composure gone, mascara smudged, her whole body shaking. Dad! Her voice broke completely on the word. Emily. Paige. I said, catching my own slip. I'm not going to tell you I forgive you today, but I'm not going to spend whatever time I have left angry at you either. Your mother still asks about you. That's not mine to fix. It's yours. She pressed both hands over her face, her shoulders shaking once, hard, then pulled herself together, nodded, and walked toward the exit without looking back. I watched her go and felt the particular ache of a father who's said the true thing and doesn't know yet whether it will be enough. Easter came a few weeks later. My dining table had the extra leaf in it. Diane made a ham the size of a toolbox. Ellen and Denise Coulter and her son filled the loud end of the table, and at some point Denise's son looked around and said, cheerful and simple, everybody came. Everybody came. Not the people who share my last name, the people who showed up in waiting rooms, in courthouse hallways, in an empty second-floor hallway 22 years ago, when nobody else was looking. Diane caught my eye across the table and smiled, full and warm and completely unguarded. My name is Raymond Kessler. I have run the boiler room at the same hospital for 38 years, and I have never once been just the maintenance guy. What I've been, all along, is a man sitting at a table full of people who chose to be there. That is enough. That has always been enough. There's something I've learned at 66 that I wish someone had told me at 30. Dignity doesn't announce itself. It doesn't live in a title, or a raise, or a name on a building. It lives in the quiet, repeated choice to show up, to do the work, to protect the people you love, and to write things down when the world tries to convince you that what you saw never happened. I'm not a man looking for revenge, family, and I want to say that plainly. I never set out to ruin my daughter or humiliate her husband. What I did was simple. I stopped absorbing things quietly and calling it love. That's not revenge. That's family justice. And I believe some moments are placed in a man's life not to break him, but to finally show him what he was always made of. If there's one thing I'd say to anyone listening tonight, don't wait as long as I did. Don't let 66 years pass before you decide your silence has a cost. The people who truly love you don't need you smaller to feel comfortable around you. And the people who need you smaller were never really loving you to begin with. That's my opinion, family, and I've earned the right to it. This was my story. This was my family's justice. If any part of it stayed with you, if you've ever counted ceiling tiles alone in a waiting room, or carried something true that nobody wanted to hear, share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Leave a word below if you believe quiet people deserve to be seen. And if you'd like to sit with me again, family, subscribe. We'll be right here. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. It means more than you know.